準備はできてるな、春日。やるしかねえ。やってやりましょうや。
The entertainment industry is a funny business, isn't it? Across all mediums, film, music, television and video games, there's a propensity to churn out sequels. It's seen as safe. But sometimes, they can be anything but. What happens when your tentpole sequel bombs? When it fails to live up to the masterpieces that preceded it? Is it able to recover? Or does it divide and destroy the fan base forever? Upon finishing Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the latest in the series formerly known as Yakuza in the West, I see the same challenges as the Avengers Age of Ultron. In a sequel over 3 years in the making and bringing all series protagonists and storylines together, how do you balance the multiple story threads, motivations and backstories justifying the screen time of your ensemble cast and interweaving the additional episodes in between, while providing a compelling and cohesive experience for your core audience, while at the same time providing a barrier of entry low enough for a new audience to become attached. Age of Ultron was successful commercially, but fell below the first film's box office take, and fans and critics also weren't as convinced. And while the Avengers was able to recover strongly in Infinity War, the video game audience is often less forgiving. So, 6 months after its release, did Infinite Wealth match its early commercial success by successfully navigating those challenges, or does it fail in delivering its lofty ambitions? We start Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth where Kasuga left off in Yakuza 7. The Tojo and Omi clans are disbanded, Kasuga is making an honest living at Hello Work, finding jobs for citizens of Ijincho in Yokohama, and more specifically helping the now out of work former Yakuza readjust to society. His old crew, Namba, Adachi and Saiko, are close by and doing well, though through a series of events, Kasuga and his party are split up and lose nearly everything. And so, to find answers and with a chance to meet his birth mother, who was thought to have been killed, Kasuga and the player arrive at Hawaii. Of course, things aren't quite what they seem, and in the midst of a number of betrayals, Kasuga is saved by no other than series icon Kazuma Kiryu, and the team up. With their respective objectives coincidentally aligned, the two take on the Hawaiian underground and build a new party of unlikely heroes before some familiar faces return to produce the largest cast of playable characters yet seen in a Like a Dragon game. From a gameplay standpoint, this is an evolution of the 7th entry in the series, Yakuza Like a Dragon. You have a vast open world to explore. Initially, the fictional Yokohama district of Jincho, where the previous game was predominantly set, and then Hawaii, and eventually the series' iconic Kamurocho district. Combat is turn-based with a decidedly Persona influence on how the action button layouts function and appear on screen. However, the battles themselves have an element of tactical RPG in them, as positioning is an essential part of strategy. New to this game specifically, you can move your characters within a defined limit when their turn comes around, adding a further layer of strategy to the proceedings, and meaning you don't get the issue in Yakuza 7 where your characters end up sprinting half a mile across the area to register a hit. Aside from that, the combat is nigh on identical to the last game, and that's not a bad thing. Aside from the aforementioned issue with characters having to do a 1500 meter dash to get to their target, the previous game's combat was pretty much perfect in my eyes, and Infinite Wealth improves on it in meaningful ways. Elemental attacks and status effects feature, as do special moves and team moves, which work like a cross between Chrono Trigger's cooperative techniques and limit breaks in various Final Fantasy games. There's an abundance of equipment, crafting and skill options, and the class selection from the previous game also makes a return, with even more jobs than ever before. Suffice to say, the combat can be extremely deep. Traversal is pretty much the same as prior Yakuza games, as you explore the vast open areas, engage in side quests and activities, eat in restaurants, visit cabaret clubs, and all sorts of other shenanigans. There is so much to do in this game. There's a dating app that I didn't really explore, but could be interesting if you're into that sort of thing. More My Speed was a fantastic Crazy Eats game that plays like a full-on Crazy Taxi clone, even down to some of the control, bonus and visual aspects. But you can't go into the Infinite Wealth side activities without talking about Sujimon and Dondoko Island, which are basically Pokemon and Animal Crossing respectively. Sujimon made an appearance in the previous game, Yakuza Like a Dragon, whereby you catalogue the enemies you fought in a Suji-dex, effectively collecting Sujimon. Sujimon was a portmanteau of super jittery men and were effectively all the weirdos that you'd encounter and battle during the game. Infinite Wealth takes this much further by introducing Sujimon battling. Here you'll create a team of up to 6 and take on trainers around Hawaii, eventually taking on the Sujimon gym leaders and becoming the master of the Sujimon League. It's a fantastic and engaging approximation of Pokemon, all delivered with the series' trademark humour. Dondoko Island, meanwhile, sees Kasuga washed up ashore on an island resort which has been destroyed by waste-dumping pirates. While there is some combat with the said pirates, which takes on a different form to the main game, the main focus of Dondoko Island's subgame is in collecting, building and attracting new island residents and tourists, much like Animal Crossing. You can fish, catch bugs and expand your home. I spent dozens of hours on this alone, as even after turning Dondoko Island into a 5-star resort, there was still so much to do, including adding new cast members to the tourist list and training your Sujimon. Yep, Sujimon play a big part in the Dondoko Island resource collection late game, weaving the two substantial activities together. It's absolutely masterful. Aside from the usual sub-stories and the other aforementioned activities, Infinite Wealth brings back training dungeons. Unlike the purely combat-driven tower in Yakuza 7, Infinite Wealth has a couple of fully explorable, multi-level dungeons to grind. In these, you rescue missing persons while scavenging rare crafting items and gaining increased levels of battle experience. If you're struggling with a specific part of the game, these are ideal for visiting and grinding. In makeup, they're extremely similar to Tartarus in Persona 3, right down to rescuing people, how the map functions, checkpoints and bosses at certain levels and more. It really does feel like Persona 3 Yakuza Edition. These dungeons are interesting, though they're not as engaging as either the main game or its Shin Megami Tensei original. They're fine for grinding and getting rare items, but they do outstay their welcome somewhat if you want to see each one to its conclusion. So yeah, there is a lot here. And that's even without me touching on the Sega arcade games like Sega Bass Fishing, Virtua Fighter 3 and Spike Out, which I also spent hours on at a time because I absolutely love those games. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth is an absolutely gargantuan game, though that was never in doubt. But does that scope impact its overall quality? Let's go back to the story. RGG Studio really were trying to create something ambitiously epic here, with an all-star cast and the two most prominent series protagonists in one game, with a narrative that would look to resolve both of their long-standing character arcs. The game starts well as we pick up exactly where we left off in the previous game, with the Tojo and Omi Alliance factions disbanded, Kasuga seeking an honest life, and the team going about their daily lives. We even get a couple of early brawls to break up the exposition and cutscenes to help things along. However, after the first hour, the game's pacing issues really start to take hold. It takes a few hours for Kasuga to get to Hawaii, and a few hours more to reintroduce Kiryu. That's not to say that what happens in between isn't worthy of your time. The introduction of new cast members, Tomizara, Chitose and Yamai, are all done pretty well. Yamai in particular, but the process of getting the story to go from point A to point B sometimes feels too drawn out. Things do pick up when Kiryu joins the team, and we get all sorts of fantastic moments and characters. The introduction of the crooked cop through the conflicts with the brutal Barracuda's gang, headed by Danny Trejo voiced Dwight Mendez, is fantastic. Even as that concludes, the further mystery around the other powers at play is extremely engaging in the most Yakuza way. However, eventually those pacing issues do return. Things occasionally slow to an absolute crawl. The reintroduction of the previous cast members doesn't happen until about the final third of the game narratively, though at this point the game absolutely bombards you with a slew of new activities. Without getting too spoilerific, the core cast is split up, with Kasuga focusing on the Hawaii side of the adventure, while Kiryu returns to Ijincho and then later Kamurocho, at first as a farewell or homecoming tour, and then later to deal with a threat at home which runs in parallel to that of the one in Hawaii. Kiryu's story then becomes tied to his specific side quest activities, as they need to be progressed to a certain point before the main story can continue. These are fantastically well done, and anyone who has been with the legendary character throughout the whole series will eat up all of the callbacks and returning characters. I saw all of the activities to the end, and I was so very glad that I did. Kasuga's story, meanwhile, becomes more linear, and that's possibly where a little fatigue comes in near the end. I noticed that my Kasuga team, for example, were about 5 levels below that of their Kiryu-led counterparts, owing to which side of the tale I actually found more engaging. The Yakuza series has always been fantastic at telling a deep and personal story interwoven with an engaging crime drama, and it does so despite a number of conveniences and contrivances. In Infinite Wealth, due to the scope and scale of the story being told, those contrivances become a little too weighty in my opinion, and as a result, the suspension of belief and the pacing both suffer. And for all of the trademark mystery, from an antagonist perspective, the reveals and subsequent battles are a little bit underwhelming. As grand as the plan for this entry was, unfortunately, from a plot perspective, Infinite Wealth doesn't quite stick the landing. As good as the battle systems and the gameplay are, I think elements in those two aspects do actually play a part in how the finale lands. Yakuza 7, or Yakuza Like a Dragon, featured some absurd difficulty spikes, requiring me to really consider my team's jobs, specs, armour and level, grinding out experience several times to clear those humps. And these were spikes that were actually welcome. Not only did they make me really think about my team's strategy, but narratively, they made absolute sense. Infinite Wealth has no such sections. For all the new and interesting job roles, I went through the majority of the game only changing jobs once. Everyone was able to steamroll their enemies on their base jobs. Again, this is in contrast to the previous game where specific roles were suited to certain bosses requiring respecking and grinding to overcome. Even battles with those same characters who represented mountainous difficulty spikes in Yakuza Like a Dragon represent little challenge in Infinite Wealth. And this is exacerbated by the fact that the dungeons were only won once, yet I still felt over-leveled for the final battles. It all felt too easy. Thankfully, aside from those final confrontations, we get an incredibly satisfying ending for everyone, especially our two main protagonists, and that in itself makes the journey worthwhile. Like Age of Ultron, narratively, we get there in the end, if the journey is somewhat uneven and not quite as satisfying as either the previous mainline entry or the substantial side story that came in between installments. When Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth launched, it did so to critical acclaim, becoming the highest ranked entry in the franchise and breaking sales records. Before I managed to get my hands on it, it felt like everything I dreamed could be true. It remains an absolutely outstanding game, but is definitely an uneven experience with pacing issues compared to the previous entries. The ambitious scope of this star-studded epic isn't quite realised, and for me it lags behind entries such as 0, 4, 7 and even Gaiden. That it's the highest rated entry in the series is more a reflection on critics being sensationalist, trend-chasing fanboys giving the series the acclaim it deserved years ago, rather than the industry media being able to provide a fair, objective and balanced review. But that's a whole other discussion. If you're a fan of the series, Infinite Wealth will definitely deliver, more for the side quests than the main story. The main story is still great, but I don't think the experience is up there with the best that the series has to offer, at times feeling frustrating to get through because of its pacing. As the most successful game in the series so far, my biggest hope is that RGG Studio look at what worked and what didn't in this game and the previous when creating the next entry. Infinite Wealth is a fantastic title with some frustrating flaws, but the Like a Dragon series is stronger than ever. With the live action TV show scheduled for this year, the popularity of Sega's most important in-house series behind Sonic the Hedgehog could increase exponentially, and a future installment that capitalises on that while resolving Infinite Wealth's flaws and delivering the brilliance that the series is renowned for could really give the franchise the level of success it so richly deserves. 6 months later, it's easy for me to recommend Infinite Wealth to Like a Dragon or Yakuza veterans who haven't played it yet. If you're new to the series, start with 0, unless you only want to play the RPG games, in which case start with Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon. If you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like and subscribe, hit that bell for notifications to stay on top of all new Sega Guys content, and if you want to be extra mega, think about becoming a member, which you can do for less than £1 a month. Thanks for staying until the end of the video regardless of any of that, and until next time we will see you on the Sega side.